So we really appreciate Doctors Dodge and Rader being with us today to talk about their research and what we can learn about brain development. And I'll just start by asking, from the perspective of children's brain development, why is self-regulation so important?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks. You know, I would say that there's a lot of research on young children's brain development, particularly from birth up through age 2 or 3, like before age 3. And there's a lot going on now recently focused on preschool age children's brain development, but it's a lot of it's quite new because young children, they like to move around a lot, and a lot of this research relies on MRI, and you have to be pretty still in there in MRIs. But what we're seeing is that from a review of the research, the most recent research, it seems like brain development seems to be, a lot of it seems to be going on in areas that support self-regulation abilities, and that seem to align with what we see behaviorally in children who are of preschool age, which is that they're beginning to show stronger abilities to regulate their own behavior. Obviously, they're not great at it when they're in preschool, but they start to exercise more control over their emotion regulation, which is their ability to control their emotions either in the positive direction or in the negative direction, as well as executive functioning, which is a set of cognitive abilities that children have to control their thoughts and then control their behavior, like inhibiting impulses. And we see that the brain evidence seems to match up with that. So the areas like the prefrontal cortex, which is in the front of the brain, is highly involved in self-regulation, and we see rapid growth in that area during this time, involving like growing of synaptic connections as well as growing of things like surface area in the brain. And then a really growing area of research is the idea of neural networks, where these are different parts of the brain that are connected to do higher complicated functions. And we know a lot about networks in adults, not as much in young children, but some of the early work in young children on networks is seeming to show that during this preschool time, children are starting to show more efficiency in these networks, and they're starting to operate, those networks are starting to operate similarly to adults. So these networks that are involved in self-regulation seem to be developing rapidly during the preschool period. So that suggests to us that self-regulation from a neurological perspective is important, and it matches up with what we see behaviorally in kids. We know that those behaviors are important for school readiness, school achievement, social competence, behavioral adjustment, and it seems to line up with the brain work.
So there's a lot going on in this age in their brains. Can you talk a little bit about what role children's experiences play in shaping their brain development and ultimately their social emotional development?
Yeah, absolutely. For those of you who are able to read the brief that we wrote, the brain develops contingent on behavior. So it's a mix of genes and environment that contribute to all of children's development, but that includes how the brain develops. Genes lay out what we think of as a blueprint, not necessarily that that blueprint will definitely be followed, but much like that of an actual house where you have a plan and then that plan might change as the house gets built. That's kind of how genes work. They set out a plan for how their brains will develop, and then that plan gets changed based on the environment that they grow up in. And experience really guides how the brain grows. So children are forming these synaptic connections or connections between the cells and the neurons in their brain. And those connections get strengthened and they get pruned away based on what children do and the experiences they have. So if children are given the opportunity to practice skills like self-regulation repeatedly in environments that give them a variety of ways to build their skills in controlling their own behavior, controlling their own emotions, that builds stronger connections within their brain areas that support those skills. So the more experiences children have with different things, not just self-regulation, the more it builds up those stronger connections in the brain that allow them to do those things more easily and more quickly and more efficiently.
It sounds like we have a lot of opportunity to shape brain development and ultimately development. So what role can interventions play in supporting children's development in the 3 to 5 age group? And what recommendations do you have for interventions with this age group?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Catherine. So intervention should build on the rich stimulation that we want to afford our babies. And so during the preschool years, intervention should focus on enhancing children's self-regulation. Children who are able to avoid getting overly upset or excited or distracted, or who can stop themselves when they do start getting overly excited, are going to be more able to perform well in school, get along with other children, get along with adults, and be successful in school and life. The brain science tells us there are two components to self-regulation that we want to enhance. First is emotion regulation. This is self-control. This is the stop function when we get out of control. We need to teach our 3 and 4-year-old children the difference between what they feel and what they do. It's okay to have feelings of sadness or even anger. It's not okay to break a window, right? All feelings are okay, but not all behaviors are okay. We want to teach children to identify emotions in themselves and in others so that they can gain control over them. We want to teach them the difference between feeling sad and feeling mad. 3 and 4-year-old children have a lot of difficulty doing this. They have difficulty recognizing in others whether others are sad or mad, and they have difficulty recognizing in themselves. So we want to teach emotion understanding and emotion regulation, stop, delay of gratification. The second thing we want to do is teach executive function. By executive function, we mean planning, decision-making, thinking ahead, evaluating what one does before one does it. We want to help 3 and 4-year-old children realize that they're a person in control of themselves and can engage in self-reflection. Maybe the first time in one's life that a child learns that she or he is a self and can talk to oneself and to control oneself and to separate one's mind from one's behavior.